This is the one part of your cabin build that if you get wrong, everything else falls apart, literally. Your walls won't be square, your doors won't close right, your floor will bounce like a trampoline every time you walk across it, and you won't find out until it's way too late to fix it cheap. I'm about to show you exactly how I framed the floor of my off-grid cabin, for under budget, using lumber you can get at any hardware store, with zero fancy tools. And stick around, because at the end I'm going to show you the one mistake that almost cost me my entire floor system. The kind of mistake that's invisible until your first heavy snow load. Before we grab a single board, if you're serious about building your own off-grid place, hit subscribe and tap that bell right now. I'm documenting this entire build start to finish, foundation to roof, and floor framing is where most first-timers waste the most money. You do not want to miss the next video where I show you how this floor holds up after the first hard freeze. Alright, let's get into it. Section 1. Why floor framing is the most important day of your build. Okay, so here's the thing nobody tells you before you start a cabin build. The floor is the foundation of every measurement that comes after it. If your floor frame is out of square by even half an inch, that error doesn't go away. It multiplies. Your wall studs won't line up. Your roof trusses won't sit right. Your door will have a gap you can see daylight through. So today, we're not just nailing boards together. We're setting the reference point for the entire structure. I want to be honest with you about something too, because a lot of cabin channels won't say this part out loud. Building affordable doesn't mean building cheap in a way that cuts corners on strength. It means being smart about where you spend and where you save. On floor framing specifically, this is not the place to save money. This is your structural skeleton. It's carrying every piece of furniture, every appliance, your wood stove, and you for the next 50 years. Spend the extra 10% here, save it somewhere else, like interior trim or cabinetry. So let's talk about what we're actually building today, piece by piece, starting with what's underneath the floor before a single joist goes down. Section 2. The foundation. Piers versus slab versus skids. Before you frame a floor, you need something to frame it on top of. For a small off-grid cabin, you've basically got 3 realistic options, and the right one depends entirely on your site access and your soil. Option 1. Concrete piers. This is the community standard for remote sites, and it's what I used here. You dig or auger holes below the frost line, pour concrete footings, and either set precast piers or pour in place columns on top. Piers are the go-to when you can't get a concrete truck to your site, because you can mix small batches by hand or wheelbarrow them in. Option 2. A slab foundation. Stronger, more permanent, better thermal mass. But you need site access for a concrete truck, and that alone can add thousands of dollars if you're building somewhere remote. Slabs also lock you into your final elevation, so if your drainage plan is wrong, you're stuck with it. Option 3. Skids. Basically large pressure-treated timbers laid directly on gravel pads. This is the cheapest and fastest option, and some people even build cabins this way, so they're technically classified as movable structures, which can matter for permitting in certain counties. The trade-off is less permanence and a floor that sits closer to the ground, which means more moisture exposure. I went with concrete piers for this build because my site is rocky, sloped, and about 40 minutes from the nearest concrete plant by dirt road. Piers let me level each corner independently, which mattered a lot given how uneven this ground is. One honest note here, no matter which foundation type you choose, check your local building department before you dig anything. Some rural counties genuinely don't enforce residential building codes, but well and septic permits are almost always still required, and skipping permits can come back to bite you later if you ever try to sell or insure the property. It's a 5-minute phone call that can save you a massive headache. Section 3. Materials list. What you actually need. Let's talk materials, because I know this is the part you're really here for. Here's exactly what went into this floor frame for a modest single-story cabin footprint. For the sill plate, that's the board that sits directly on top of your piers or foundation wall, I used pressure-treated 2x8 lumber. This has to be pressure-treated, no exceptions, because it's in direct contact with concrete and moisture. Regular lumber will rot within a few years. For the floor joists themselves, I went with 2x8 pressure-treated joists spaced 16 inches on center. Now, some builders will tell you 2x6 is enough for a small cabin, and technically it can work for very short spans, but I'd rather have the extra strength, especially once you factor in the weight of a loaded wood stove, water storage, or a loft above. If your span is under about 18 feet, 2x10s or even 2x8s at 16-inch spacing will comfortably carry residential floor loads. But always check a span table for your specific lumber grade and species, because Douglas fir, spruce pine fir, and southern yellow pine all carry different load ratings. Quick math lesson that trips people up. Joist spacing tells you how far apart the centers are, not how many boards you need. You always need one more joist than you have gaps, so a 16-foot wide floor at 16 inches on center needs about 13 joists, not 12. Get this wrong and you'll be short a board on delivery day, and trust me, that's a frustrating trip back to town. For the rim joists, sometimes called band joists, I used the same 2x8 pressure-treated stock, run around the entire perimeter to box in the ends of the field joists, and tie the whole frame together. For the subfloor, I used 3/4-inch tongue-and-groove subfloor panels, screwed down every 8 inches along each joist. Tongue-and-groove locks the edges of adjoining sheets together, which stops independent flexing between joists and gives you a noticeably stiffer, quieter floor than a standard butt-jointed panel. Don't skimp here either. A thinner subfloor will flex and eventually crack your finished flooring down the road. Hardware-wise, joist hangers at every connection point, hot-dip galvanized or the newer Z-Max-coated versions. This actually matters more than people think. A lot of today's pressure-treated lumber uses copper-based chemicals that will corrode standard steel hardware over time. You want fasteners and hangers specifically rated for treated lumber, or you'll be replacing corroded brackets in 5 years instead of 50. And on cost, going into 2026, expect to pay somewhere in the range of $450 to $800 for the framing lumber alone on a floor this size, depending on your local lumber prices and whether you're buying 2x8 or 2x10 stock. Add another $100 to $200 in hardware, joist hangers, and fasteners. It is not the cheapest phase of the build, but it is the one phase where cutting corners costs you the most in the long run. Section 4. Tools you actually need. Not a fancy list. You do not need a job site full of specialty tools for this. Here's what actually got used today. A circular saw, a framing square, a 4-foot level, and honestly a laser level if you have access to one, because it saves so much time checking pier heights. A tape measure, get a good one. This is not where you want a tape that stretches or a hook that's bent. A chalk line for marking joist layout across the sill plates. A hammer for the joist hangers, though I'll be honest, most of this went together faster with a framing nail gun. If you're running off solar or a small generator, a battery-powered nail gun is worth every penny. It saves your generator fuel and your sanity. And a speed square. If you don't own one of these yet, get one. It is the single most useful $5 tool on a framing site. Section 5. Laying out the sill plate, where everything starts. All right, this is where the real work starts. First step, get every pier top level with each other. This sounds simple, but on uneven ground like mine, it took longer than the actual framing did. I used a laser level set up at a fixed point and checked every single pier against it, shimming with pressure-treated shims where I was off by a fraction of an inch. Once your piers are level, you lay down your pressure-treated sill plates. These sit directly on top of the piers and get anchored down, either with anchor bolts cast into the concrete or with post-base hardware if you're using precast piers. The sill plate is not just a spacer, it's what separates your wood framing from direct contact with concrete, which cuts down on moisture wicking up into your structure. Here's a detail almost nobody talks about, and it's one of the most commonly missed steps on off-grid builds. Run a strip of sill sealer or a foam gasket between the concrete and the sill plate. It blocks air infiltration and moisture transfer at one of the most vulnerable points in your whole structure. Skip this, and you'll likely feel a cold draft right at floor level in winter. One of the most common complaints from first-time off-grid builders, right up there with under-insulated rim joists. Once the sill plates are down and squared, and I mean squared, measure both diagonals corner to corner and adjust until they match. You're ready to start laying out your joists. Section 6. Laying out and installing the floor joists. Layout is where a lot of first-timers get sloppy, so let's slow down here. Using your chalk line, mark your joist locations on top of both sill plates, every 16 inches on center, starting from the same reference corner on both sides, so your joists run perfectly parallel and square to each other. Now here's a tip that will save you real grief. When you're picking up each joist board, sight down the length of it before you cut or install it. Lumber almost always has a slight crown, a gentle bow along its length. You want that crown facing up every single time. Gravity and the weight of the floor will pull it flat over time. Install it crown down, and you'll end up with a permanent dip in your floor that no amount of shimming fixes later. Set each joist into place, and if you're using joist hangers off a ledger or beam, nail those in according to the hanger's specified nail pattern. Don't skip holes, and don't substitute screws for the specified structural nails unless the hanger is rated for it. If you're face nailing directly into a rim joist, toe nail from both sides for full holding strength. Work your way down the layout, joist by joist, checking that top edges stay flush and level as you go. Every few joists, stop and recheck your overall square with a diagonal measurement. It's a lot easier to fix a small drift now than after all 13 joists are in. For any longer spans, or if your design includes a loft above, you may need mid-span blocking, solid wood blocks installed perpendicular between joists at the halfway point, to stop the joists from twisting under load over time. It's a small extra step that adds real long-term stiffness to the floor. By the time the last joist goes in, you should be able to walk out onto the frame, carefully, and feel almost zero flex. If you're getting noticeable bounce at this stage, before the subfloor is even down, that's your sign to double up a joist, or add blocking before you move forward. This is the moment to catch it, not after your walls are already up. Section 7. Squaring, bracing, and double-checking before subfloor. Before you put down a single sheet of plywood, do the boring but absolutely critical step. Check square one more time. Measure diagonally from corner to corner in both directions. If those two numbers match, your frame is square. If they don't, you nudge the frame until they do, before anything gets permanently fastened down. Add temporary diagonal bracing if your frame feels at all racked or wobbly at this stage. A scrap board nailed corner to corner will hold everything true while you finish fastening joist hangers and rim joists. I know this step feels tedious when you just want to see plywood going down and the floor coming together. But an out-of-square floor frame is, hands down, the #1 thing that causes headaches for the rest of the build. 10 extra minutes here saves you entire days of frustration when your wall framing doesn't line up 3 weeks from now. Section 8. Laying the subfloor. Now for the satisfying part. Lay your 3/4 inch tongue-and-groove subfloor sheets across the joists, staggering the seams row to row so you don't end up with one continuous seam line running through the middle of your floor. That's a weak point you want to avoid. Fasten every 8 inches along each joist line using structural screws rated for pressure-treated lumber. Again, watch your hardware compatibility here. The same corrosion issue applies to screws as it does to joist hangers. Leave a small gap, about 1/8 of an inch, between sheets to allow for seasonal expansion, especially important if you're building somewhere with big humidity or temperature swings. And this is the moment where it finally actually looks like a cabin floor. This is usually the point in the build where I stop and just stand on it for a minute, because after piers, sill plates, and joist layout, seeing a solid, walkable deck out here in the middle of nowhere never gets old. Section 9. The mistake that almost got me. All right, remember at the start I told you I'd show you the mistake that almost cost me this whole floor? Here it is. On my very first pier layout, I leveled everything off a single reference point on flat ground near the truck. Except the actual building site sloped downhill by almost 8 inches over the full length of the cabin. I didn't catch it until I'd already set 3 piers, because I was checking each pier against the one next to it instead of against one fixed, unmoving reference line the whole way across. Here's the fix, and please save yourself this headache. Set one fixed reference point, a stake driven into the ground outside your build area entirely, at a height you're not going to touch, and check every single pier against that same point using a laser level or a line level and string. Never level piers against each other one at a time, because small errors compound across the whole run and you won't notice until you're way too far in. I caught mine before I poured concrete, thank God. If I hadn't, I'd have had a floor frame that was subtly out of level from one end to the other, and on a cabin, that kind of error shows up everywhere, from doors that won't latch to a wood stove that doesn't sit flat. So that's the floor, done and framed, square, level, and ready to carry walls. Total time on site for this phase, about 2.5 days, working mostly solo. Total material cost, all in with hardware, right around $650. If this helped you out, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach other people trying to figure this stuff out for themselves, instead of paying a contractor $40,000 for a cabin they could build themselves for a fraction of that. And subscribe, because next video, we're framing the walls on top of this floor, and I'm going to show you how I squared up an entire wall system solo, without a second set of hands. If you've ever wondered whether you can actually build this stuff yourself, with no construction background, I didn't have one either. Stick around, and let's keep building. See you in the next one.